And it was released by, as we know, the kind of eclectic punk rock alt band REM. And it's a kind of an apocalyptic song. It includes this chaotic flurry of seemingly nonsensical words, along with a really nice chorus that we can all sing to, right? Basically, though it seems like there's these disconnected references that come up in the song, its essence is really saying, hey, the world is going to end at some point, but why worry? Everything will be fine. It's just going to happen. There's nothing we can do about it. The lead singer, Michael Stipe, one of the writers of the song as well with his bandmates, he spoke about the abstract nature of the lyrics. He was interviewed, I think, in the early 90s about it. And he says, the words come from everywhere. I'm extremely aware of everything around me, whether I am in a sleeping state, awake, dream state, or just in day-to-day life. He gave an example. There's a part in the song that came from a dream where I was at Lester Bang's birthday party, and I was the only person there whose initials weren't LB. So in many ways, this song moves a little bit like a dream does. It's shotgun quick, and it's abstractly non-linear. And if you are someone like me who has weird dreams, I don't know, like if you have these dreams that are logical, they make total sense, you're like, aha, I understand everything that's going on, that image, that symbol. But if you're like me, you have really weird dreams with strange symbols and different things going on, and sometimes you just jump from one event into a seemingly unrelated event. And so it's a little bit like that song, but it's also a little bit like the book of Revelation. What I want us to do at this point, we're going to have the reading, but what I want you to do as we have this reading is to choose a posture, whatever that may be for you, that allows you to use your imagination. So for some people that might be closing your eyes, just listening. You might be closing your eyes. If you're not comfortable with that, it may be just looking at something or looking up or whatever it is. Just find a posture where you can engage your imagination. So we are going to read chapter 12 of Revelation. Tony is going to start us off with that.
Revelation 12. A great portent appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pangs, in the agony of giving birth. Then another portent appeared in heaven, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems on his heads. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. Then the dragon stood before the woman who was about to deliver a child, so that he might devour her child as soon as it was born. And she gave birth to a son, a male child, who is to rule all the nations with a scepter of iron. But her child was snatched away and taken to God and to his throne, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, so that there she can be nourished for 1,260 days. And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought back, but they were defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. The great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven proclaiming,
Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God, and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters has been thrown down. Who accuses them day and night before God? But they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. For they did not cling to life, even in the face of death. Rejoice then, you heavens, and those who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you with great wrath, because he knows that his time is short.
So when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had delivered the male child. But the woman was given 2 wings of the great eagle so that she could fly from the serpent into the wilderness, to her place where she is nourished for a time, and times, and half a time. Then from his mouth the serpent poured water like a river after the woman to sweep her away with the flood. But the earth came to help the woman. It opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. Then the dragon was angry with the woman, and went off to wage war on the rest of her children, those who keep the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Jesus. Then the dragon took his stand on the sand of the seashore. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Thank you, Tony, and for Jeremy as well, for reading that. How did that make you feel? You feel fine? Sermon done. Excellent. Let's go home. Anyone else feeling fine listening to big omens and portents and big dragons attacking? You doing all right?
Feels very punk rock.
Sorry?
Feels very punk rock. Punk rock.
Okay. Anybody else?
I feel queasy about the second book of giving birth.
You got queasy?
This scene.
Yeah.
Can you repeat it?
You have to speak up for me.
Queasy about women giving birth.
Queasy about women giving birth. Women giving birth.
In this scene. In this particular.
In this scene, yes. Definitely in this scene. Not in general. Yeah? Anybody else?
I think about it must have meant something very different to the people who first heard that story that they don't have access to, and so it's very mystifying
Yeah.
in a profound way.
So very different to, or the symbols must have meant something very different to people back then?
Yeah,
Is that what you're
it
saying?
obviously meant something very
Yeah.
specific to the people who heard it.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily always know.
Yeah, very specific. Yeah, it's true. There is for sure a context to this reading and to the book of Revelation as a whole. And what I want to remind you of first is actually what Caitlin was speaking about the last time, 2 weeks ago, during our last service. And Caitlin introduced us to apocalyptic literature and Daniel 7. And if you remember Daniel 7, it was like this beast and this statue and all this kind of different stuff going on. And in a sense, that's a little bit of a background to these images that we have today and to the book of Revelation. And so some of the things that Caitlin mentioned about apocalyptic literature, I want to remind us of, because one of the things that it does, because of what it does, and one of the things that it does is it connects us to our human experience by way of the imagination. So we're very used to storytelling and narratives and letters and things like that in the Bible. So we get this very symbolic book of Revelation that seems almost fantastical and imaginary and all the rest of that. And you're actually supposed to connect with that in terms of your imagination. It's not meant to tell you a straightforward narrative of these are who the people are involved, this is what's happening, and this is what it means. It's not doing that at all. It's actually tapping into that very aspect of our human nature, that is our imagination. And I think kids are probably better at this than adults. I mean, I know I love the dystopian fantasy novels, because in some ways it is a little bit of an escapism. But it taps into that part of me that uses my imagination, that lets me kind of figure out theories about the world and how it works or how it shouldn't work or whatever it is, but it does it by way of symbolic pictures and images. And so what that does is it does, in many ways, it forces us to respond. It forces us to feel something as opposed to understand something. It connects us to the world around, but it also, as Caitlin said, it acknowledges our limitations of knowing. There are some things that we just don't know, and we may never know. So we have this book of Revelation, and specifically today looking at chapter 12. But of course, to understand chapter 12, we have to understand and read the rest of Revelation. It's probably, I say this of all books actually, when it comes to reading, read the whole thing. But it is especially important for the book of Revelation because there is so much to do with symbolic nature of things and imagination or all the rest of it that actually tracks through the book of Revelation itself. And so at the very beginning, we learned that the book of Revelation is what we call an apocalypsis. And that is, it's actually an uncovering, it's an unveiling. It's the very first word of the book of Revelation in Greek is apocalypsis, of Jesus Christ. So that should tell you pretty much everything you need to know about the book of Revelation, right? Good? Yeah. It's an uncovering, it's an unveiling to do or about Jesus Christ. And we need to keep that as at the forefront of everything else that we look at. And I think this is where we easily get lost in the book of Revelation, is we forget that first sentence. This is an unveiling of Jesus Christ. We also learn that it's a prophecy. It's a prophecy, and a prophecy is simply a communication of truth. Sometimes it does foretell. Sometimes it's an assessment of what's been happening, and it's a challenge or a condemnation within the current situation, that if you do this, or if you continue in this way, for example, then maybe some not so nice things are going to happen. But you have a choice. You always have a choice. And that is prophecy, communicating revealed truths. The other thing the wonderful thing about the book of Revelation is it's a letter. So not only is it this apocalypsis, this prophecy, it is also a letter, which brings us to the point that there was a specific situation at a specific time that made this letter and these words of importance and value. Beth, can you just help me with this? I think we decided around here somewhere was helpful. I'm going to make you do some work. Do you have nice handwriting, Beth?
I did it for Caitlin, so.
Oh, I feel like you should complete the task. Yeah. My handwriting isn't always that wonderful. But I want to give us what happens really up until chapter 12, and then a little bit, just very briefly, about what it's talking about afterwards. So really the context that chapter 12 comes in. Now, the first thing that we have is we have 7 letters to 7 churches. That's chapters 1 to 3. And within that initial sort of beginning, we are told that John, who is basically writing all this down, he's having this experience, he sees 7 lampstands and some other stuff. And we are told, right at the very beginning, we're actually told what it means, which is wonderful. The 7 lampstands represent 7 churches. And it's these 7 churches that this letter of Revelation is going out to. And within those letters, there's a very basic formula. He addresses the church. He says something like, I know what's going on. I know what's happening. You're doing great at this, but you're not doing great at this. And if you continue with the not so great stuff, I might come and take your lampstand away, or your lamp or something. And so we learn that through each of the 7 churches. And of course, 7 has that meaning of kind of completeness, of perfect, whatever you. So maybe the 7 that you read about, 7 churches, it's actually a letter that's broader than just those physical located 7 churches. After he writes to the 7 churches, John is basically transported to a heavenly throne room where a scroll with 7 seals that can only be opened by a slaughtered lamb. And what this does at this point is it sets off a chain of 3 sets of 7. So you have 7 seals, 7 trumpets, and 7 bowls. So 3 sets of 7, which is basically 3 perspectives on the same event. Now, I know, like, those of you who maybe grew up in the Satanic Panic, what is it called? Satanic Panic, yeah, that one. You know what I mean? Oh my gosh. Yeah, that time. Those of you would have perhaps heard of, the Left Behind series, and what was before that? Was it the late great Planet Earth? And Apache helicopters were supposed to be the locusts and things like that. It doesn't really work like that here. What you do see is you see 3 sets of 7. 3 sets of 7. So you get 7 seals, which are opened one by one. You get 7 trumpets, again, going off one by one. And then you get 7 angels with 7 bowls, and each bowl is poured out. And what you tend to see, even though they kind of have slightly different descriptions, they're pretty much telling the same event. And what they're doing is they're pulling back from the imagery of the Old Testament. And so what you see is a repetition of the plagues in Exodus. You see locusts, you see all this kind of stuff. So you see these judgments that are coming forth through the sets of 7. Now, our section, the chapter 12, is kind of a pause or hiatus in the action of the 7 judgments. So it comes after the 7 trumpets. And with the 7th trumpet, we then get this section, which talks about the woman and the dragon. After that, we see the fall of Babylon, and there's a final kind of cosmic battle, and then we see the new heaven and new earth, or the new Jerusalem, depending on what it says in your text. That's okay, just right. Basically, what I want you to see is that we have a letter that is very specific in the beginning to situation at the time with the 7 churches. And then John is taken up into this heavenly throne room, and he hears things and he sees things. And so it's important to take sort of special attention to what he sees and what he hears. Because sometimes he hears things, but he sees something more or something slightly different. But what we have is really a series of judgments. And in that first part, what we hear is that these judgments did not result in people repenting. And so the story continues. But when we get to chapter 12, this pause in the action specific to these 3 series of 7s, we get something else going on. And it's, in some ways, it seems like something bigger is happening. And so what characters do we see in this text? This is where your work comes in. And also, those on Zoom are welcome to contribute. What characters do we see in chapter 12?
Dragon.
Okay, so we've got a dragon. We've got a child, yeah. Did you say a dragon? A pregnant woman, thank you. Sorry, I don't always hear very well. So, yeah, so we've got a dragon, we've got a pregnant woman, and we've got, what did I say, a child, yeah? How is this woman described? Very celestial, yeah. Yeah, we've got a woman, she's clothed with the sun, she has the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. So yeah, very majestic, very cosmic, very, all those wonderful words. And she was pregnant and giving birth. Then this other omen or portent appears in the sky, and that's where we get the great red dragon. And I like how the First Nations version talks actually about a fiery red sea serpent, which I actually think is a lot more accurate to the text. And so this great red dragon, what are we told about this dragon?
7 heads.
7 heads. 10 horns.
Tail.
What's that?
Powerful tail.
A powerful tail, yeah. There's something even before that. 7 diadems, so 7 kind of like crown sort of things on its head. Yeah, and its tail comes and it sweeps down a third of the stars. And throws them to the earth. And what is this dragon doing in this passage? You don't have to make it up, it's all here. Destruction. What else does it do?
Steals the child.
It tries to steal the child. What else?
Floods, initiates a flood.
Initiates a flood. Yeah, so this dragon being is basically out to try and get the child. So this child that has been birthed by the woman is significant. And so this dragon tries to pursue the child, but kind of the child gets snatched away. And so what does the dragon do? He what?
Goes to heaven as a battle.
Yeah, he goes to heaven and has a battle. Yeah, he tries basically to chase the woman, to try and get her, but she is somehow protected. And so basically this war happens in heaven. And we find out that the dragon is then cast down to the earth. We are told at that point that this great dragon, so I'm looking at verse 9, this great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver. Now, where in the Bible have we heard of a story that talks about a serpent, great sea serpent, whatever, dragon, great sea serpent, a serpent, and a woman being at odds with each other? Genesis, exactly. We're talking about Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. And so all the way through Revelation, I think Revelation is actually the book with the most Old Testament references in the Bible. So, forget about Hebrews and all those other ones that you think might relate more to the Old Testament. No, it's the book of Revelation, because the author, and I presume God in some ways, knew what symbols and imagery would be important to those people that would get them going, oh yeah. It's actually a book for Bible nerds, I think, because it says, oh, you should think Genesis. When you think of the blood of the lamb, when you think of, let's say, the child who is going to rule with an iron scepter, it's straight from Psalms, straight from the book of Psalms, Psalms 2, talks about a child. When we talk about a woman giving birth, that imagery, straight from Isaiah 66. And so you can just pull out all these events and culture and history. The other thing that is interesting, does anyone know Greek mythology very well? Maybe. What about the birth of Apollo? Do you remember anything about the birth of Apollo?
Callie was here, she could tell you.
Kelly knows.
Oh, Kelly! So there was twins, yeah? So Apollo and Artemis, they were born to Leto, who was kind of the, side eye, whatever, the extra person, god, with Zeus. So Zeus was married and then had relations with Leto. Leto then carried twins, Apollo and Artemis. And I should have it here somewhere, as always. No? So basically, this is a little bit from memory. I thought I had it down. I maybe lost that piece of paper. There was another god called Python. Python being, actually the original word was drakon as well, which is dragon, serpent. There's all these correlations. And so Python heard about this happening, and that eventually the prophecy was kind of like that Apollo would defeat you, Python. He would take over Delphi and, all this. And Python didn't like that. So he started to pursue the woman. He started to try and attack Leto and to basically kill the child, but he never succeeded. But when Apollo was then born, Apollo learned about this story and basically went after Python and killed Python. And so that Greek mythology, I think, plays into our understanding here as well, with those images and these stories that are very similar, that the first hearers are going, oh yeah, I get that. It's not about telling reality. It's not about saying this symbol means exactly this, and this is what you see around in the world today playing out in history. It just says these symbols represent something nasty and something bad. And there is a battle that is going on that is beyond what we see. How that plays out, we don't know. This is just a description of that cosmic battle that is going on. But what that should kind of produce in us, even though initially some of the images are a little bit scary and wacky and out there, what it should do is start to conjure up within you, and certainly within the first century or whenever it was, hearers who were likely suffering some kind of situation in which their faith was at risk or their testimony was at risk, because we're told, how did they conquer? That this dragon may seem really attacking, wants to devour and all this dragon does not succeed. We're told that the way to overcome is by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. And so even though we don't know everything that is going on, there should come some kind of reassurance that as we look at the world around us, as you experience maybe suffering, maybe death, it does not say you won't experience that. But in the midst of it, know there is something bigger going on. And that God is in control. He has the authority. We don't know when these things will happen, but he has got it sorted. So, what that does is then present a choice. It presents a choice for the original hearers, and it presents a choice for us. Are you going to follow the beast or the dragon and experience defeat? Or are you going to follow a lamb that is such a contrast in picture? And it's not just any lamb, it's a bloodied lamb. It's a lamb that gave its life in some way. Are you going to follow the lamb or the dragon? And here it is. If you follow the dragon, this is what's going to happen. If you follow the lamb, you will conquer. That's the choice. But what we understand from this, and if you go further into the text, is that the dragon starts to play with empires and nations and leaders. And those are where the beasts start popping up. And we start to see how very often empires put themselves in the place of God. They try to take over, they try to force certain things. But what will happen is empires will come, leaders will come, they may promise wonderful things, but they will fall if they continue to be influenced and follow the dragon and the beast. So I think about people in Palestine, in Gaza, and I think about Israel, and I think about what Israel is doing or has been doing for nearly 12 months now. The destruction that is coming, that keeps on coming, the lack of compassion and empathy, the way that people are dehumanized. And I think, I don't get it. I don't know why you feel you need to do this, why it's happening. It is wrong. It needs to stop. But it's for some reason it continues. And so what I do know, and I know this through the book of Revelation, from the imagery that is used, is that one day judgment will come. I don't know if it's going to be in this lifetime, but judgment will come, and judgment will come to those who create chaos and destruction in the world. But those who follow the Lamb You're going to be all right. You'll be fine. It may be the end of the world now. It may be the end of the world 10,000 years from now. But you're going to be all right.